the highest percentage caseload will be the situs of the office at any given time. But I will fully serve each of the 5 counties, making sure they're each represented adequately and competently with lawyers who can successfully try a criminal case and get a guilty verdict.
Okay, thank you. For Mr. Lavender, this is kind of a part of Lee's question. Have you been asked in the past by any of the constituents to move the DA's office out of Elberton, and what have you told them?
I've never been asked by the constituents in any county to move the DA's office one way or the other. We have expanded the size of the DA's office here in Elbert County. I expanded the operation of the DA's office by opening an office in Franklin County to try and better serve all the people across the circuit. I have no intention to move or change any of the offices at this time.
Okay, thank you. This question comes from Karen Hardy. It's for Parks White. She writes, "It's my understanding that you moved to Hart County from Augusta, and then in a matter of days," she writes, "you went to Atlanta to register as a candidate for a DA in the Northern Judicial Circuit." She also writes, "Do you truly have the interests of residents of Hart, Elbert, Madison, Oglethorpe, and Franklin in mind?" Or, she writes, "Are you just looking for a job that pays better?"
I can answer that question pretty easily. When I joined the Navy in 2007, I took a 25% pay cut to go on active duty. When I left the Navy in 2011, I took a 25% pay cut to return to the DA's office. Money is not a motivating factor for me. I'm here because this is where my home is. It's where my grandparents are. It's where my father is, where my stepmother is. My aunt and uncle live in Hart County. This is where I've always intended to return, and I'm glad to be back.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lavender, this question comes submitted from Greg Ayers. He writes, I have a personal interest in my family. In the cases that actually ended in a guilty verdict, how many of them were the result of a plea bargain and a reduced sentence? He'd like to know what percentage of cases that actually go to trial end up with guilty verdicts, and then he offers some statistics, which you get the chance to disprove or whatever. He says he's told between August of 2009 and August of 2010 that the district attorney had a 29% conviction rate at trial. Please speak to that.
Okay, be glad to. Well, first of all, I'll let you know that we don't keep statistics one way or the other. But I knew that some of the people had an interest in this, so I had some of my people do some figures on it. At one time, I thought about instituting a statistical attaboy program among the ADAs, but I felt that was going to curtail their judgment in what cases should or should not be tried. Because whether you feel like you're going to win a case or not doesn't determine whether you think it should be tried. If it's an issue that needs to go before a jury and a victim needs to have their day in court, you should try it. As to the percentages, we ran the numbers. We came up to about 84%. As to pleas that end up in guilty, every plea ends up with a guilty plea. Some are reduced. I don't know how you can answer that. Every plea ends up with a guilty plea.
Okay. Thank you very much. This question is for both of you, and we'll go with Mr. White. Butch Smith wants to know, when was the last time you read the U.S. Constitution?
Cover to cover? No,
he wasn't specific.
I frequently read the U.S. Constitution. I usually keep a copy on me. I don't have it with me tonight. I regret that fact. But, you know, the Constitution is the most sacred document in our United States. It is a document that applies very strictly to the prosecutor's office. Many of the amendments in the Bill of Rights are restrictions on government power and have to be observed strictly by a prosecutor. The Fourth Amendment's a protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment's protection against being a compulsory self-incrimination. Sixth Amendment's right to counsel. Those are all things that have to do with prosecution and your court system. So I can't say exactly when it was, but probably within the last 2 weeks. But I've referred to the Constitution.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lavender, same question.
Well, as far as reading the Constitution cover to cover, I guess that's been a while. As far as referring to it, we did that today in court as it applies to criminal cases. And as Mr. White said, right to counsel rights and whatnot. We do that frequently in regard to the areas that apply to criminal court or criminal prosecutions, probably every day.
Thank you very much. These questions come from the media, and we'll go with Mr. Lavender first. In your opinion, sir, is the DA's office and the Public Defender's office, both in the Northern Judicial Circuit, are they properly funded and staffed?
No.
Question.
I don't think the Public Defender's office is properly funded. In fact, we had a lot of problems with that over this past 4 years. When the budget crunch came, there was no money for appointed counsels for defendants. If counsel isn't appointed for defendants, we can't deal with their cases. So it's just a snowball effect. As far as my office particularly, we get the only funding we get from the state government really is salaries. The rest of the expense is covered by the counties.
Mr. White, same question. Do you feel that both the Public Defender's Office and the District Attorney's Office, do you feel that they're properly funded and staffed?
Well, I know the issues that Joel Shivers had because I've sat down and discussed it with him. He's an outgoing public defender, and he's actually the person that compiled the numbers between August 2009 and August 2010 that showed that Mr. Lavender's office had a 24% conviction rate against the Public Defender's Office. So they're doing their job pretty well. I mean, 76% of the time at trial they're getting an acquittal. But do I think they're adequately funded? Probably not, but everyone has to work within a budget. In Augusta, we have 5 times the number of people in our circuit, and we're operating with 3 times the number of attorneys that Mr. Lavender has in his office. And we still manage to keep our dockets timely. We manage to try plenty of cases, and we don't let cases sit 3 or 4 years on the docket before they're actually brought to trial.
Okay, thank you. And in keeping with the tradition, and we'll start with Mr. White, can you say something nice about Mr. Lavender? Absolutely.
Mr. Lavender is a family man. He's been spent a lifetime here in Elberton. I understand he has children and grandchildren. He's retirement eligible, and I'm just hoping he'll enjoy his retirement and get more time to spend with them.
All right, thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Lavender, same question. Can you say something nice about your opponent?
I can't. I don't know Mr. White personally. I haven't known him as far as I can recall. The first time I met him, I think he said he came by my office several years ago. It was a few months ago, but I appreciate his service to our country.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I think that, why wouldn't you? It's time for our 2-minute closing statements. Mr. Lavender, you go first, please.
I'm trying to, but hold them cards up higher so I can see them. All right. Thank you very much for having us. I do want to say that the focus of my office always has and always will be the service to the people. We're passionate about our prosecution, but we're compassionate in dealing with people. I believe people are entitled to their day in court, and victims are entitled to have their say before a jury. We grade cases 10 to 1, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, but we don't dismiss cases that are ones. We know that we aren't going to have a good shot at winning that case, but there's a victim that has a right to be heard, and we do that. In regard to those 192 or whatever cases, they weren't cases, they were warrants that were never served. No case files were ever generated on them, and no report of them was ever made to our office. We don't get the warrants until they've been served on somebody, unless it's a special presentment, and that's another category. But we don't dismiss cases. We don't fail to prosecute cases. Never have, never will. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lavender. Parks White, your 2-minute closing statement, please.
On my wall, I have a quote from Justice Sutherland in a case called Berger versus United States that says, The prosecutor is not merely the representative of an ordinary party to a controversy, but of a sovereignty whose obligation to govern impartially is as compelling as its obligation to govern at all, whose interest in a criminal case, therefore, is not that he shall win, but that justice shall be done. He is in a very peculiar and definite sense the servant of the law, the twofold aim of which is that guilt shall not escape or innocence suffer. He may prosecute with earnestness and vigor, indeed he should do so, but while he may strike hard blows, he is not at liberty to strike foul ones. Guilt shall not escape or innocence suffer will be my motto as your DA. With a 71% acquittal rate, either a whole lot of guilt is escaping or a whole lot of innocence is suffering. One of the two. It has to be both. It has to be one of the two. Investigate it yourself. I'd ask you to go out and talk to someone you know in law enforcement, someone you know personally in law enforcement. And the candidates might not be able to give you an answer on this, but if you know a local deputy, you know a police officer, ask them how they think the DA's office is doing in serving the community. That way it's not coming from me. It's coming from someone you know. I'm looking forward to serving you as your next district attorney, and I hope I can count on your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Parks White, Bob Lavender, one of these two gentlemen will be your next Northern Judicial Circuit District Attorney.